Hello, good evening, and welcome to Mind and the City, Design Manchester's 7th debate about design and society. I am Casper de Graaf. In previous years, the debate has been held in a range of venues, including the Whitworth Gallery, the Bonded Warehouse at the Old Granada Studios, once the home of Coronation Street, and the Benzie Theatre at Manchester School of Art. This year, we come together in an exciting new venue, namely the privacy and intimacy of your home. And for the first time, we're also co-located in 2 cities, Manchester and Rotterdam, plus with others attending from around the world. We're here to debate mental health and well-being in the built environment, a topic that was important long before we were hit by the coronavirus pandemic, which has now revealed many more of the pressures and disparities faced by individuals and communities. The Great Debate is a Design Manchester institution, but we are delighted this year to link up with 2 great partners, the SICK Festival in Manchester and Rotterdam's contemporary art institution, Kunstinstituut Melli, who are currently collaborating on Mindscapes, a UK-Netherlands project using artistic intervention to explore the impact our environment has on our mental well-being. So, before we start the debate, I would like to invite Tim Harrison, Creative Director of SICK Festival, and then Sofia Hernandez Chancoy, the Director of Kunstinstituut Melli, to say a few words about a series of Mindscapes events taking place over the coming weeks. Tim.
Thanks, Casper, and welcome everybody. As Casper said, I'm Tim Harrison, Creative Director of SICK Festival, and this is the first event of our Mindscapes public events programme. So Mindscapes is a project that's been developed by myself and my colleagues at SICK Festival, exploring how our mental health and well-being more generally are affected by our environment. But it's also been about building connections and sharing experiences between artists, arts organisations and communities in Manchester and the Netherlands. So it's really great to see so many representatives of both on the panel and in the audience here tonight. So as part of Mindscapes, we've commissioned 5 great new projects by Dutch visual artists, poets, performance makers, digital artists, filmmakers and musicians. And we've curated a programme of online discussions, of which this is the first. So one of the most exciting things about the development of Mindscapes for me has been the collaborations. We've worked really closely with public health organisations, mental health charities, the City Council here in Manchester, Transport for Greater Manchester, and loads of other different community groups. The original idea was that the artists would come from the Netherlands to work closely with communities in Manchester, and all of that still managed to go ahead through the power of Zoom, although in quite an adapted format. So we've worked with arts organisations in Manchester and Rotterdam, including Young Identity, Brighter Sound and Theatre Zuidplein. And of course, we've worked with our fantastic co-presenters, Design Manchester and Kunstinstituut Melli, to create this evening's great debate. So big thank you to Casper, and it's been a really interesting process for me to have conversations and share ideas and find out where those kind of points of common interest have been between ourselves and our organisations. And also a huge thank you to Kunstinstituut Melli. So that probably seems like a good point to say I really hope you enjoy this evening's debate, and to introduce Sofia Hernandez Chancoy, who is the Director of Kunstinstituut Melli.
Hi, thank you both to Casper and Tim for this introduction. It has really been a pleasure to collaborate for several months now in the planning of Mindscapes, that while it's not going to happen directly in Rotterdam, it does involve so many of the great minds that live here in the city and its vicinity. My name, as said, is Sofia Hernandez Chancoy. I'm the director of Kunstinstituut Melli. We were founded in 1990 in the center of Rotterdam in what's called the Cool District, and we are at the axis of a museum boulevard that really locates numerous arts institutions in town that are greatly visited by many Rotterdammers and people from all over the world. It's an innovative city, and it's also always at the, I would say, the ambition of breaking ground on several subjects. For our interest to participate and collaborate with Design Manchester, with SICK Festival, is to do with the fact that we have been really focused on questions around inclusivity that do not involve just questions around accessibility or medical aspects, but really to think in an intersectional way around questions of gender, of class, and clearly of race, and the ways in which cultural institutions can participate with caretakers, scientists, academics, and clearly with artists in advancing society in better ways. So in conjunction to the conference Mindscapes and the participation of this wonderful Design Manchester debate, we have staged a project at the intersection of art and education at Kunstinstitut Meli. It's called 84 Steps. And it's the number of steps that you go from the ground floor, the street level, to our third floor. It's a project curated by Rosa de Graaf, by myself, and in which 4 different educators at our team participate in creating trainings and activities that as soon as the lockdown eases, we will be able to welcome you and all audiences. In the meantime, I thank you all for attending this great debate that will also be much food for thought in terms of advancing society intersectionally, and always with taking in mind the importance of mental health and well-being for creating artistic and creative environments, but also civic responsibility and social advancement. So thank you for welcoming me, both Tim and also Casper, and I wish you a great big debate today.
Thank you very much, Tim and Sofia. And so to our distinguished panel. Ellen van Loon, partner at the Office for Metropolitan Architecture, is one of the world's leading architects. Her signature projects include the Sterling Prize-nominated Maggie Centre in Glasgow, the Mies van der Rohe Prize-winning Dutch Embassy in Berlin, and the Rotterdam, the tallest building in the Netherlands. Ellen is the lead architect of the £120 million new Factory Arts and Cultural Centre in Manchester, which is currently under construction. Saeed Kazmi is Rotterdam's wethouder, which is the cabinet member or deputy mayor with responsibility for education, culture, and tourism. With Rotterdam still the busiest transit port in Europe, the Dutch have a saying that money is made in Rotterdam, distributed in The Hague, and spent in Amsterdam. But Rotterdam is itself one of the finest cultural cities in Europe, noted for groundbreaking architecture, its annual film festival, and internationally renowned cultural institutions like Museum Boijmans van Beuningen, Kunstinstituut Meli, and Kunsthal. One of the most interesting aspects of the €4 million cultural investment program for South Rotterdam, recently announced by Saeed, is the funding for extra cultural education in primary and secondary schools, particularly, as he put it, for the benefit of children who aren't getting that at home. We may well touch on how important art and culture are for young people, but I suspect that what excites our audience most about Saeed's responsibilities, although I'm not sure about its impact on our mental health, is that Rotterdam will be hosting the Eurovision Song Contest next month. I know a few people who can't wait. Manchester is known for the Industrial Revolution, for science, design, music, and of course football. But there is no doubt that culture has played a major part in the city's amazing regeneration over the last 25 years. Dave Moutry used to be director of the Cutting Edge Cornerhouse Gallery and Art House Cinema before overseeing the creation of Home Manchester, a major new arts venue that opened in 2015 with a theatre, studio space, 5-screen cinema, and art gallery. In addition to running Home, Dave is also Director of Culture for the City of Manchester, leading the cultural recovery programme as we emerge from the pandemic. The artist Jan Rothhuizen is best known for his human representation of the built environment in the Soft Atlas of Amsterdam and similar explorations of public environments and cities from Tokyo to New York, Beirut, and now Manchester. The Dutch newspaper NRC described his work as attentively observed and lovingly drawn representations that capture the mentality of the city and its inhabitants. Jan's Mindscapes observations of Manchester have recently started popping up at bus stops and metro stations all over the city. I first met Lena Haak at a Design Manchester workshop in 2014, not long after she and her colleague Sean Gilroy had set up BBC Cape, a project aimed at creating a positive environment where the BBC as employer empowers, values, and benefits from the different talents and contributions offered by employees who occupy different positions on the spectrum of neurodiversity, including autism, ADHD, and dyslexia. Their work has led to a broader exploration of the field of cognitive design, looking at how different people understand and experience environments, including the sensory environment checklist for designing buildings. Lena's work is informed by personal experience, and she has been recognized as one of the top 50 most influential neurodivergent women. Welcome all. So now it's time for our first question, which comes from Alistair Scott from Method X Studios in London, which works on scalable prevention of poor mental health for a mass market. Alistair.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Despite all the money that's been spent by governments, COVID-19 has exposed underlying inequalities and lack of resilience. When life goes back to normal, whatever that is, what legacy will we face in terms of health and well-being, and how can we best address that?
Thank you very much, Alistair. That's great. Very interesting. Of course, as you say, when life goes back to normal, whatever that is, that's maybe one of the big questions there. And the inequalities that have been revealed or perhaps exacerbated by COVID. Now, I know, Dave, that you have led the cultural recovery program for the city of Manchester from coronavirus. So I wonder if you'd like to kick off with that one.
Thank you, Casper, happy to. So, I mean, just putting it out there, I'm not a medical expert, but we have been listening to people who are in the city about what we think will be the underlying inequalities that are the underlying problems, that are challenges that are the legacy of the COVID pandemic. We saw in the news recently about there's a huge backlog of NHS treatments that people are not going to be able to get to, which is pretty obvious. There's the impact of long COVID on people's physical health. But there's also the mental health impacts, which are very wide-ranging, caused by significant isolation that people have experienced in over the last 12 months. The constant feeling of jeopardy and threat that people feel as though they've faced, and the uncertainty around work, and what that means for them not being able to get together with other people. There's lots of different causes to this, but we do know that the impact of that will be significant, and particularly in the context of this debate, how people want to access and use the public realm. And I'm talking about the public realm in its widest sense, both indoors and outdoors. Public libraries are part of the public realm, so theatres, as well as outdoor space. And there are lots of challenges there to do with the way people feel about being in the same space as other people. And that will continue. There are also lots of challenges about how we make people feel secure in that in those situations. So I think those are some of the things that we're trying to deal with and support in our recovery strategy for the city. But just to finish, the one thing I would say is that in the conversations that we've had with the NHS and also other partners in the city, is that culture will be an important part of the recovery process for our city. It's going to play a really important part of people re-socialising the public realm, re-socialising with each other, and discovering life on the other side of COVID.
Thank you, Dave. Saeed, if I may turn to you, how does that experience described by Dave of what is happening in Manchester and the planning that's happening in Manchester for post-coronavirus, how does that compare with what's going on in Rotterdam?
Well, First of all, thank you very much for inviting me for this meeting. Well, I'm particularly concerned about children and young people's well-being, as of course the education vice mayor. They have been so incredibly limited in what they have been able to do over the past year, that many of them have become insecure, stressed, or even depressed. They are full of questions about their future. Will I be able to catch up my learning arrears? Will I be able to find a work experience placement? Will there be a job out there for me? It's therefore of the utmost importance that young people are able to go back to their trusted school buildings as soon as possible and pick up where they left off. The education sector must ensure any arrears are made up as soon as possible. And also culture is of essential importance to allow children and young people to feel happy about life and themselves again. Being creative isn't just a great outlet, it will definitely also contribute to their personal, social, and creative development. Another worrying point is the increased loneliness among Rotterdam's elderly and vulnerable residents. This group has sadly become more and more isolated over the past year. We can work on reducing their loneliness and improving their mental well-being by organizing cultural activities for them too, as well as provide a greener and more attractive environment.
Yes, this is a very interesting point that you raise about the difference, I suppose, between virtual and physical. And during coronavirus, obviously, physically getting together has disappeared and people are only getting together digitally and on these types of platforms increasingly. So in what ways has that affected people's mental health? Said.
Well, of course, it has a big effect on people if they're not able to have contact with each other anymore and to see each other anymore. It's for many people, it means that they lost their social structures if they cannot interact with the people in a way they always are used to. So I think it has a big impact on the mental well-being of people. Also, if I look at my colleagues and people that work at the municipality, they are complaining about the lack of interaction between people, and that they are saying that it takes too long. It has been too long that they have been interacting with other people. So for the mental well-being, the digital working on the long run has a negative effect.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Jan, if I can turn to you, you have been observing people's moods and reflecting that in how you show them. And I'm just wondering, during this period of coronavirus, what impact that has had on people's moods, on how people feel about things, and whether you think that the impact that it's had is something that has a long tail, that is going to last, or that it will just disappear again and just dissipate when COVID goes. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm also wondering about it, whether we think back as a long boring movie, which was COVID, and that we go back to our normal lives. But yeah, I'm thinking of one person I met via Zoom. She's called Bunny and she lives in Moston. And what happened to her, she was in the middle of therapy. She said she opened Pandora's box because she was very depressed and just got into therapy. So she was very fragile. And she said, yeah, all of a sudden, like everything shut down. And I felt like I was like on a raft on the ocean, totally lost. And she had a really hard time to sort of like get back to life or to reconnect to people. So I was thinking, we were talking about a group of, like, I was thinking it's so strange, like we train ourselves, like if there's like a fire, we train how to get out of the building and we'll run out in safe time. But we should also train ourselves, and especially people that work with really vulnerable people. We should train ourselves how to maintain contact when all contact is lost. So I think this is a very, very important thing. Yeah.
And we're actually very, very dependent on these alternative ways of communicating, working, and when they don't work, that's a problem, isn't it? I wonder, Ellen, if I could ask you whether there are implications and changes for how we design spaces that we've learned during the experience of the pandemic. I mean, we know that some of the patterns in which people work and live and so forth may be changing, and there could be implications there for what we do with places. But everything that you do in terms of designing buildings is to do with people and interactions. Do you think there are changes in how you think about this for the future?
Well, I think that there will be, I mean, I'm not only talking about buildings I'm working on, but more the public realm. I think what COVID showed, in my opinion, is that we lack space, you know, so, and I think, you know, some people live in a large house, so for them, it's not a big thing, but, you know, you can imagine if you live for more than a year at home in a little flat with, you know, family packed on each other, you just have no breathing space. So what I learned from this pandemic is that we should maybe really rethink cities in such a way that we get more breathing space, all of us, because I think cities are designed, they are designed and optimized to the max to get the maximum of, you know, value for money, development, etc., etc. But we forget in there actually our public space. And I think it's interesting in a city. I think a city needs to be very diverse. But I think we need to also have places in a city where you can, where it's very quiet and empty almost, and cities where you can get very close to each other. Because I think these, so it shows for me this whole COVID period that we have more needs than we thought. And that is also very important that we work on those needs and do more about it. And I think that is really a city planning task to make sure that, you know, that land is not always used for a maximum commercial return, but is also used for maximum social return, I would say, for its inhabitants. And in areas where people live in very small flats and very small houses, there we need to give even more attention than, you know, in areas where people already have a lot of space. And I also think we should also start rethinking how we design apartments, you know, social housing. You know, most apartments, I mean, it's a bit different in Manchester than maybe in Rotterdam, the trend is going on. But, you know, people have a really small balcony. You can hardly fit a bicycle on it. I mean, it's these kind of things that I think are very important to look at and also make that part, because there are also lots of stories that this is not the first and not the last epidemic. You know, there are also stories that this might reoccur in the future. So in that sense, I think we need to be prepared, and prepared in such a way that everybody can have a reasonable quality of life in such a period.
And how we design places affects how
Exactly.
we feel about ourselves.
Yeah, but at the same time, I also must say, I live personally in Rotterdam. I saw because of COVID also very nice things, new things happening in the city. You know, there's outdoor sports everywhere. You know, there's complete sports schools where people sport outside even when it's -1 degree Celsius.
Yeah.
So there are also really nice things happening. So I think those kind of nice things that are an outcome of this period, we should also embrace.
What I was going to ask you, Lina, is you have always come from the angle of what spaces actually feel like, you know, how they're actually experienced, and everybody seems to be coming onto your territory. We're all talking about what spaces feel like now, but in relation to this question, I suppose the real issue is, have things changed during COVID in a way that is going to last beyond COVID? What do you think?
I think in a way, the pandemic's highlighted the barriers and accessibility issues many sort of marginalised communities face. So we've had people who are able-bodied who've moved into a space where people who are disabled, elderly or neurodiverse, you know, experience that living in isolation, anxiety issues, not being able to get access to the relevant services and support, and remote working. So, you know, these are issues that those communities have always had to put up with to an extent, you know, and lockdown has in a strange way has leveled the playing field, or at least people can experience what it's like for the other, you know, those marginalized communities face day on day. So, you know, when we return to normal, I feel that we should remember that not everyone is going to be able to return to this new normal or whatever it's going to look like post-COVID, and they may not even want to. And it's about being mindful and to consider how we can continue to include everyone when things move on. And hopefully most people will remember this time and will be able to reflect and will have more compassion. So in sense of answering the question around what kind of legacy this will have, I'm hoping a legacy of compassion and kindness, and better understanding about those groups who go through those accessibility issues day in, day out before the pandemic happened.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well, in that case, I think, Simon, if you could unmute yourself, I think this is a perfect moment for you to come in and speak about what you're doing in Camden.
Thank you very much, Casper. I feel privileged to be amongst company. Thank you. I think that the question really, or the point I'd make to the panel, which I think is interesting around the sort of activation of green space in particular, is the way in which it can be used to connect communities or connect town centres into their environments. The example that I think Casper's probably encouraging me to talk about is the Camden High Line, which is a piece of disused railway infrastructure, a bit like New York, on a viaduct that runs between Camden Town and King's Cross. And they're both international town centres in many ways, and yet they go through areas of quite high deprivation, of quite high density in terms of social housing and so on. And the way in which we can try and use green space, and of course the 15-minute city agenda that we're all talking about now, that some of us were talking about ages ago, is very much to the heart of this. How do you use these things to connect the communities to the town centres that actually they may have felt removed from, in a sense, a long time ago?
Well, thank you very much, Simon. I think it's a very exciting project that you're involved with. And I think how we green our cities is such an important question. And I know in Rotterdam, there are also many green spaces. Is creating more green spaces an issue in Rotterdam as well, Said?
Well, yes, of course, as one of the former speakers just said, what we see now is because of COVID, people are more outside. They are actually rediscovering their own city. And what COVID taught us is that the public space is very important because of the social distance. So we need to go outside because there's more space, of course. And this space should be attractive for people to be in. So what we have been doing, and not only since COVID, but actually years before, is we understood that an attractive city is a city where there's less traffic. I mean, there are more pedestrians and more traffic of bicycles, but less cars. An attractive city means also that there should be enough greenery. There should be beautiful parks. And every year we do like how do you say that, we ask residents of Rotterdam what they think is important, and almost always in the top three is greenery, is parks. So people really appreciate living in a city where they can go outside in clean air and just relax. So and during COVID, that got only more important.
What I'm now going to do is go to Floor Margarita Cornelissen for our second question. And Floor is a cultural leader in Rotterdam who has actually played a major role in bringing SICK Festival and Design Manchester together to do events such as this. Floor.
Hi there. Thank you for the introduction, Casper. I was wondering, based on the discussion about Eurovision Song Festival, digital meetings, and what the losing of social structure means. And in that perspective, I was wondering, what is the role of public art in creating environments that are good to live in for health and well-being?
Great, well, thank you very much. I noticed, I read in a story, Said, that you opened or unveiled an artwork called Rotterdam in an underpass in Rotterdam, and that you were talking about how the art made people appreciate the environment more and made it safer. So I wonder what your perspective is on art in the public realm.
Well, of course, art in a public space is very important for many reasons. Of course, first, one of the reasons is it makes the public space more beautiful. That's one. And we know that people appreciate living in a city where there is art in the public space. Another thing why art is so important is that art has the power to tell stories, to connect people, to tell a story about a person, about a culture, or about a city. So art also bonds people and makes people creative. So it's very important to have art in the public space in a city. And Rotterdam is known for its public art because we have a big collection of public art in our city. So for many reasons, like I said, it's important to have art.
Thank you very much. Dave, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I think public art's got a really important role to play, but I think we have to remember that public art is a very broad spectrum of things. So on the one hand, you've got public sculptures, statues, and all of those sort of things that have been commissioned by civic authorities. We've also got, I would say within that spectrum, we've got architecture, building design. The outside of buildings is public art. The way in which we lay out our gardens and green spaces is all part of that creative spectrum. But alongside of that, an expression of why people need it can also be seen by the fact that some people take it into their own hands to create art in the streets, in the public realm. So graffiti is a great example of this. Some graffiti is just, tagging or whatever. Maybe I don't necessarily personally see that as art, but there's lots of other graffiti that is. And it engages people in all sorts of different conversations, either about politics, aesthetics, or whatever. So as human beings, working, I would say regardless of social class or education or whatever, we intrinsically want to create things. And we also intrinsically want to see beautiful things or things that we enjoy. And so public art, I would say, is fundamentally important in that. and is really good for creating spaces that people feel comfortably engaged in.
Well, I wonder, Lena, I wonder if I might ask you whether public art, I mean, we're all going to say, yes, public art is very important in buildings and in the public realm and it's for people's mental health, but actually can public art be both positive and negative sometimes? How does it come across? Are there different sides to the question?
I mean, for me personally, I feel it's important in the sense of creating a sense of belonging. Also justice in terms of, like, I've seen lots of things after the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, the images and murals are quite, you know, powerful. And also in sense of creating a sense of identity. I mean, I can think of an example, a really good example where I feel public art has impacted well-being in the sense because, you know, I think it was a study that was done by Durham University where 72% of the local residents said that the Angel of the North gave them a positive feeling. So, you know, there's evidence of it impacting well-being in a sense. But in terms of negativity, I personally haven't experienced it, but I can imagine that some pieces of art may be invasive to others if they have certain cognitive conditions or neurological conditions where it may be, you know, too much for people, or they may be overwhelmed on a sensory level. So it's again, you know, it depends on who you are as an individual and in terms of how it impacts your senses. But I think it's important to be aware of that. But for me, public art is a positive thing, and I'd love to see more. It would be great to see more of it because I feel it's a way, since the pandemic, I think there's been a loss of the sense of community, and it can be a great way of reconnecting people and bringing communities together post sort of lockdown and COVID.
So Casper, can I just come back in?
Dave, please do.
Yeah, something that Lena mentioned there sort of prompted a thought in me, and something in the chat. We always think of public art, or we seem to always, in dialogue, think about visual art. Well, yes. Well, actually, a busker on a street corner is public art, if they're good. You know, I see processions. You know, I see some great art as part of the Pride procession in Manchester, as well as good fun. Public art manifests itself in lots of different ways. It's art in the public realm that people can access, I think, and we shouldn't just be focusing on statues and sculptures, which quite often are dull.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you what you were saying, and I think also art is not always beautiful. I think that's not really the point. No, art is also an expression of different opinions. I mean, I always come up with the example how hip hop was born. Yeah, that was just born in a bad neighborhoods where, you know, kids had nothing to do and music started being born, and only later on it became, you know, a well-respected form of music. So I think art is not only there to make it beautiful, I think it's also not something that everybody should like. I think it should be very diverse, and it should at least give people the opportunity to express their opinions. So, because diversity is, I think, in my opinion, also inclusive, you know what I mean? So,
yes, we have sometimes in Design Manchester events used the analogy when we're in terms of how we bring art into a design festival, that we're thinking about, well, we're talking about art as asking questions and design as providing answers, which is maybe a little bit simplistic, but it says something about the separate role that they each have. But I wonder, Ellen, in your case, to what extent you feel that public art or art in the public realm has to be designed, you know, its use, how it's used, or, you know, to what extent it just has to be permitted or allowed or occur.
Yeah, I think we need to find a balance there. I mean, I had a lot of discussions with MIF when we were designing, you know, the Manchester factory building, because that whole idea about this building is just, you know, that it is for the society and it is for everybody being inclusive. And I mean, what for me was really important, that there is a mix, let's say a mixed program, you know, So it's not only a program where people show something they designed or created, you know, because that is interesting, because that gives you inspiration for doing other things. But I think it's also important to let people create, or create an environment where, you know, young kids who basically are very creative in a lot of cases don't have the space to do so. I think that is for me important, you know, even skating young people, graffiti, all these kind of expressions. I think we need to find a way to make that inclusive. And of course, nobody will like that the whole city is full of graffiti, but it is part of public art. And
Yes.
because, you know, so it is important to think about how we make that inclusive.
And as you say, it is about balance, because often the best thing that happens are the things that are unplanned and unexpected, aren't they? So I wonder, Sofia, if you have something to say about that.
Yes, this is a subject that's quite passionate for me for obvious reasons. First of all, our institution is named after a public artwork, an artwork placed in 1990 in the facade of our building and throughout the city. An artist called Ken Lam created a billboard that says, "Melly Shum hates her job." And it involves the picture of a woman of Asian descent, very smiley, very happy in her office, next to the text that says, "Melly Shum hates her job." So our institution is named after a public artwork, but with this, what I wanted, which is a visual image that many people have identified and considered it a sign of immigration, of the labor practices that come with immigration, of the adaptation that comes with it. But what I wanted to say is that a lot of public art for the last number of decades has been at the intersection of social activism. And much of the public art that's created is far from being material as statues or built in environments, and instead it's about building relations. And the most successful of the public artworks are the ones that build qualitative relationships with the publics that are brought together by ideas and certainly by the organization of artists. So I just want to give a shout out there to the amazing artists that have a social practice and that have, through community-oriented work, created audiences and publics that come together to think precisely about raising questions of our present that sometimes or not design brings the answers. And sometimes design is also a main critique of artists because they have created other problems in societies that gentrify, that segregate, that create borders that are not made accessible, whether visually or physically, to a number of people. So public art, again, comes at the intersection of social activism when it is a practice of community building and of political resistance that we have seen very much in the number of decades. So just to put out there the idea that it is a mobilizer and not just an organizer in itself, right?
Great. Well, before going to the artists on our panel to ask a question about art, revolution, I am going quickly to read out some of the things that have been in the chat that are pretty interesting. The area around Canary Wharf, this is from Malcolm Garrett, in London, has more public art than anywhere else in the UK, yet that area, which of course is a financial district, has only a tiny footfall compared to most other parts of London. I've always wondered how that irony came about. So much art and so few of the public to enjoy it. Yes, I think that's not the only rich bit in which that is the case. But then Rosa de Graaf from Melly, Institute Melly, mentions that for 2 years in 2013 and 2014, there was the Art Everywhere campaign in the UK, which was later also adopted in the US. That was a collaboration between public art institutions, I know Tate was involved in that, and media companies, that saw a short list of works selected by the public, exhibited on billboards across the UK for an exhibition period of 2 weeks. That was really interesting intervention. And so, from Steph Graham, she mentions Art on the Underground. That was another public art campaign which commissioned artists to create work for tube stations and trains. So it's great how many different interpretations of what is public art and how you can do it and how you can do it differently are emerging in our cities. So Jan, you are currently sprouting up, as I was saying earlier, at bus stops and metro stations. What are you trying to achieve?
That's a question I never asked myself. But that also it's about as an artist, you don't really think in terms of goals or of maybe achievements. I think it's much more a need and an interest and a need also to express what I see and what I think and what I hear. So for me, it's much more important to sort of channel what I experience and what I hear. Then I think, well, if they read this, they will do better or be better or worse. It could also be.
Well, there's an interesting question there, which is that I always think that, you know, an artwork, you know, it's yours until you've made it, and then it starts leading its own life and it becomes everybody else's. So I wonder what feedback you're getting from, you know, people who are reading your thoughts and you know, how that makes you feel, that interaction with your audience ultimately.
Yeah, that's really nice. I get a lot of because I also publish every month in the Dutch national newspaper drawing. So I get a lot of people asking me like, oh, you should come to my street, or you should come to my room, or I have the most beautiful kitchen. Yeah. So it's really I think what I do is making a certain awareness, a certain concentration on a geological spot, you could say. Whether I visited 5 spots in Manchester, and I think it's really the concentration and then editing the content. I'm very curious about Lina's work as well, because the way I work, like when I visit a place, first of all, I try to figure out how I feel the place, or how the place sort of like affects me, or how do I change in a place. And very often this start the questioning about discovering a place. And I do this a lot with talking to other people, and I have a lot of people speaking in my drawings. So it's also like a platform, you could say. So,
great.
So, yeah.
I think there'll be an opportunity for us to talk a little bit more about, you know, the sensory design of places shortly. But first, Dave, you have a comment?
Yeah, it's just coming back in terms of public art and the relationship between that and health. That as we come through this pandemic, we are going to continue to need moments of commemoration, moments of grieving. We're going to need moments of relief, of celebration of great public effort, and all of those sort of things. And the public realm is probably a great place to do that. And you know, I think there's the sort of things that come to mind is there was the opening of the Manchester International Festival a couple of years ago. Was what is a city but its people? There was a huge catwalk with a great procession of people coming. It was a really beautiful and moving moment where lots and lots of people turned up. So I think that, you know, when we think about the public realm and the functions that plays within our society, all of those moments that make up the key emotional moments in our life, the opportunities to present them, to debate them, to think about them in the public realm are going to be really vital in the recovery of our communities and our society.
Now for our next question, it is my real pleasure to introduce someone who has been a stalwart supporter of Design Manchester and friend, and that's Sarah Elderkin, Principal Policy Officer at Manchester City Council. Sarah, what is your question?
Good evening, everyone. If environments feel hostile, illegible and hard to use, this can have a really significant impact on our well-being. I'd love to hear from the panel their thoughts on how we can design our public spaces, buildings and interiors to be inclusive and accessible for all.
So if environments are hostile, or if they feel hostile, or illegible or hard to use, and that's so often the case, and it can just be because there is a river in the wrong place, or you can't quite understand how to get from A to B, so many different things. And the key question there that Sarah is raising is, how can we design it for everybody? Do we design it for the majority, or do we design it for everybody? And is that possible? Lina, how about you?
Yes, so environments definitely can be hostile or inaccessible and difficult to use. I'm going to use neurodiversity because that's my thing, so as an example. But how do we, how do our public spaces, public transport, education, health space accommodate people who are autistic, ADHD, people who think differently or have dementia, or it could be age related, but how do we cater and design inclusively for them? And it's not just about them. We find that it's also their family members, individuals, family members, or parents with children who want to share experiences, but they're all too often excluded because a space is not accessible or inclusive for one family member. So in the end, everyone ends up being excluded as a result. I mean, I think we are getting better at it when we're thinking about inclusive design, but there is a lot more we can do. If a public space is going to play a role in daily lives, it needs to be an intersection where the physical space meets human cognition. Think about all the other senses. I think it was mentioned before, we focus on the visual a lot of the time and what we see, but what about all the other senses? How we move within a space, how we use it, how we think and feel about it, and the well-being aspect of it as well. And how do we encourage members of the public to become co-designers rather than simply service users or space users, so we can capture more of their experiences because we've traditionally ignored them or excluded them. So, my question is, does an average or typical user even exist? Human cognition is so wide and varied, as is ability or, age, etc., or cultural background. So public spaces are or should be democratic. In my opinion, it should be democratic, it should be about everyone. And unfortunately, it's not the case at the moment, especially when it comes to design, where it's about a collection of ideas brought to life. But who have we invited to bring in these ideas? That's my question. So I guess I've answered the question with another question, but it's
well,
yeah.
There's a thing that to some degree you always have to balance things. If you want something to be perfectly legible for everybody, you've got to have maximum contrast and everything be black and white and be very large type. Instead, you balance it and you have more rich information. So I wonder, though, whether our understanding of inclusive design is changing. Ellen, I wonder what you think of that. Is our comprehension of what it means to design inclusively changing, and how, and what does it mean?
Well, I maybe I want to give this a little bit more a positive turn, because we as designers, we play with senses, no? I mean, that's what we do. I mean, it's all about playing with senses and how people feel in spaces, etc. And I think also for me personally, I have to say honestly, it would be very interesting to work with people who are different from the average, and also try to understand more how their senses work and make that part of the design. And I think that's a bit of on a medical level, we describe it a lot, but we don't, because we do sometimes public spaces where we get, people becoming part of the design process. But there's always a kind of difficulty in communication, And also I feel sometimes when somebody says A, is that then really A, or should we first investigate that further and see if that leads to another 20 ideas, you know what I mean? So I think that whole perception of all inclusive design of some users, I think we need to research much more. And I think it would be even interesting, and I really strongly believe that it will give also even new ideas for everybody at the end of the day. So I think that could be very, very interesting. When it comes to, I'm not a strong believer that every public space should be the same, yeah? Because I think a city should also have diversity. A city should have different experiences in different places in the city. And, there needs to be a place for many users. So it should not be all the same, but I think everybody should get enough, you know what I mean? Because I struggle sometimes also when we have a public realm to design, that I get a long list of requirements, and then at the end, I end up with a gray field, you know, because somebody says, yeah, when it's green, I can't go over with my wheelchair. When it's too bright yellow, it's difficult when you're visually impaired. So I think that is not the way of doing it, but that is quite often for us. If you would take all these demands, we end up with a gray canvas quite often.
That's the thing about balancing it. Things.
Yeah, it is all about balancing and also using, I think, these kind of making problems an opportunity in your design, you know, or when somebody experience an exclusivity, make that opportunity.
Do you think, Lena, that point about balance, what do you think about that? Balancing needs of different, rather than always saying, oh, it has to work for everybody.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't, I don't like using the phrase, you can't please everybody, but I mean, you can strive to. I mean, I feel like it's about thinking around, you know, asking people how they actually feel, because someone may be able to, you'll ask a question, it depends on the way you phrase the question. So for me, it's like, I do have a problem with, like, when someone asks me, like a designer would say, fill out a survey, and then the survey would dictate me a building, for example, and you know, for me to go into a building, and that's the next 30 years of my life, and I've just filled out a survey. I feel like that's not enough to you know, to basically shape my experiences, because my experiences are going to change as I age. So I just feel like we need to involve people more. So I think that sort of taps into what you've mentioned around balance. We can achieve balance, but I feel if we include more in terms of the conversations, you know, in terms of co-design, which can be challenging, I get that, but at the same time, we can do more to involve people in the process, in the actual process, to achieve that kind of balance.
Yeah, which voices are at the table? I think that's a really very, very powerful point. Well, I wonder, from the city's point of view, Saeed, what can municipal government and what can politicians do to try and make sure that cities work for everyone?
Well, thank you. Well, first and foremost, I think it's very important to know what people want. When you're going to design a park, a street, or anything in the public space, it is important to also involve people who are living there. So it starts with participation, and to listen to what people like and what they want, and how they want the public space to be organized. So that's what we politicians can do. It's not always easy, because there are so many people and so many wishes. But I think the challenge is, you know, taking all these wishes and trying to strive to do the best as we can, of course. But most important thing is when designing a street or park or anything in the public space, is that it is accessible for everyone, and that it is attractive, and in that way very inclusive.
Yeah, interestingly, that Sarah has just put in the chat, perhaps we should start with asking people what they would love to have, what would make their hearts sing when encountering the public health realm and buildings, which I think is a really great sentiment. Dave, I was wondering, though, if I might ask you, because I know that one big thing in Manchester is the age-friendly city, and this designing also for people as they get older and so forth. Is that must be a big part of this conversation as well?
It is, and you know, looking after older people, because we're all going to be older people, and there's going to be more of us, is going to be really important. I think one of the things that I've learned, though, is it's building what's coming out of this conversation, it seems to me, is the importance of having conversations with people who are going to be the end users and are going to be around these things to understand what they like, and not make assumptions about what they may or may not want. So, you know, I think that a really good example is there was an interesting documentary on British TV where Yome Polenza, the sculptor, was asked to make a public sculpture near St Helens that was visible from the motorway. And it was on an old mine site, site of an old mine, and he was working with a group of miners, and there was an original proposal to produce like a miner's lamp as a sculpture, for this particular site. And the miners that he works said, yeah, that's really, why do you want to do that? That's really dull. And in the end, we got that rather beautiful head that you can see from the M62 called Dream. And so from that, a lot of people make assumptions about what older people want. A lot of people make assumptions about what disabled people want. A lot of people make assumptions about what young people want. We shouldn't be making those assumptions. We need to be having conversations with people about what they really want, and understanding that in order to create the sort of spaces that they would look for and cherish.
That's really great. I've just seen something else from Rich has mentioned in the chat. He says, my wife and I are listening with our 5 and 8-year-old children. How can designers promote the well-being of younger people at that end of the scale? So, Ellen, how do you design for children?
Well, I can tell you, we completed a project a few years ago where we designed for the first time a playground. So, and that was a very long, there was a project in Denmark, in Copenhagen. And we had a very long discussion with the client and schools, around the building that were supposed, which they want to use, of course, the playground. And it was a very long but very interesting process, because in the beginning we were a bit scared, like, okay, we have to design a playground, that is a thing in itself. And then, of course, we always have to drive, and maybe some of the public will hate me for this, to try out also some new things, like where can you stretch it or what can you do? And I can tell you it was a long process. I mean, we talked, I think, for about 2 years. We were lucky that the playground was the last thing that had to be finished on the building. And it paid back, it was a long conversation to come to the final design. And at the end of the day, it's actually quite simple. It's not even, with a lot of play facilities, but it's actually, it turned out to be a cityscape that has so many challenges in level difference, crawling, etc., that made the playground. And that was just very interesting. And I think, I must say, when the building was finished and it opened, and when the kids start really using the playground, it was really a very special moment for me. So I think that is really important to make that part. And I also realized in that process, it is quite easy to do it. It's not so difficult as you might think.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting thing I'd say about your work, Jan, is that you are actually really observing how people experience things, aren't you? I mean, and you're not just making it up, you must talk to people, you must get feedback from people, and this is reflected in your drawings. So you could say that your drawings are a form of consultation, a form of co-design, that designers can read your drawings and understand a lot lot better.
I will call Jan next time. Yeah, very
exactly.
good idea.
Exactly, but is that fair to say that about your work?
I say, yeah, that's fair, I said. But what I would like to say, going back to public spaces, because that's something I observed, and especially in Buell Hill Park, where a group of people that were living there together with the horticultural therapist created this garden, is that often when we think of public space, it's very anonymous. And I do believe that public space can be owned by certain groups, and that it should be owned by certain groups to sort of like maintain it, but also to control it. And especially, I think very often when we say, oh, public space, it's sort of like it becomes a blank of who owns this place. But I see, especially through COVID, that you see so many places sort of like start to live because people sort of like, regained it in a way.
So
the park was designed just for maintenance. So the grass was mown. It was very sort of like low maintenance public park, but it was also very loveless. And now you see the people that sort of like living there or like adopting the park in a way, really make it like viable again and really beautiful.
Great. Well, this is such a great discussion, and we could, but I want to move on to the next question because we have a few potential more questions to go through. We'll see how many we can. So what I'd like to do now is invite Steph Graham. So we're really moving from Heaton Moor over to Didsbury in Manchester, I think, to ask our next question. So Steph, over to you.
Hi. Emergency measures during the pandemic have reduced rough sleeping, but we know that the underlying problems haven't gone away. How can we best support city dwellers who fall outside the net in the post-COVID city?
People dropping out of the net and people who don't fit in very easily. And so often our immediate thought is that it's just about space. It's about giving them somewhere to live. But we know it's a lot more complicated than that. I would say that during COVID, spaces have been provided and suddenly people are off the street and much has been achieved. But we also know that's a temporary situation. How do we address these situations socially in a city in a more durable way? I'm not sure actually how much of an issue rough sleeping is and people dropping out of society in Rotterdam. Saeed, could you comment on that?
Yes, well, it is a big deal in Rotterdam because we have a lot of people sleeping outside. But what we did during COVID is that we actually, as many of you know, Rotterdam has a lot of water. So we rented a boat as a city, a big boat where these people could stay and sleep during COVID. Actually, in one of the hot spots of Rotterdam, just near the Erasmus Bridge. But it's not only about providing them a place to sleep and where they can get a shower and a meal. It's also about debt management. It's also about family counseling, and it's also about trying to give them a sense of belonging and social structures. So that's what we try to do in our city, in Rotterdam, and we are seeing that it is having benefits for those people.
Great, thank you. Steph, could you maybe come back and tell us what your thought is about this?
Yeah, I was thinking that about a park in, I'm sure there's a park in Gorton, which is an area of East Manchester that's recently been designed specifically to actually stop flooding in the area. So they've actually created a park which actually helps with flooding. And I just thought that was a really interesting example of using public realm design to actually solve a problem that potentially is putting people, you know, at risk in some way. And maybe there was a way that we could do that with homelessness, but also, I guess the glaringly obvious thing would be about the fact that so much of city centre living is predominantly very expensive in the UK particularly, and that's, you know, when we've got a limited amount of housing in close proximity to the city, anything like good quality tends to be prohibitively expensive. And you know, there's I'm sure that cities that have a low level of homelessness are doing something differently around social housing, availability of social housing within city centres, quality of that social housing, and that kind of thing.
Yes, I wonder, Dave, if I might ask you, I think, you know, we're discussing so many kind of design issues, but of course it's a debate about mental health and well-being in cities, and mental health and well-being is such a big issue when you talk about rough sleeping and the situation people find themselves in. Have the things that we've done during coronavirus been temporary solutions? What's going to happen next? How can we find a longer term way of dealing with it?
I mean, from what I've seen, the agencies dealing with homeless people have been doing what they can to work with them to try and help them work through some of the challenges that they face. I do find it a bit bizarre that, well, bizarre is the wrong word, wrong, actually, the sixth biggest economy in the world can't look after those people who are the most, some of the most vulnerable, who are living on the streets more effectively. I think there are things that we can do from the way in which we use our public space, the way in which we, as well as the way in which we design our space, in partnership with agencies that work with and support rough sleepers and those people who live in those spaces, in order to provide exit routes for them, ways of changing their lifestyle and behaviour. But design a public space, arts and culture in itself are not alone. It needs multi-agency, from what I've seen anyway, I'm not entirely an expert on this, but a multifaceted, joined up approach to support people in those particular sets of circumstances, because their needs are complex. They're not straightforward. There isn't a sort of a one-size-fits-all solution to it. But what is interesting is that when push comes to shove, we can start to find solutions when it's necessary. So why can't we find them when there is no COVID?
Yes. Ellen, from the public realm design point of view, I know that there are examples, I know not in your buildings that you've created, but there are examples where people design the public realm to make it hostile to rough sleepers, so that they can't sleep in different places and so forth. Is there actually an opposite to that? Is there a way in which we can use public realm design in a way to facilitate better routes out of that situation, I wonder?
Well, I think we can, but I can also tell you, in a lot of circumstances, we are, as designers, are asked not to place any benches to avoid sleepless people sleeping on it. In quite a lot of circumstances, we are asked as designers to block any possibility for skaters, any possibility, you know what I mean? So,
exactly.
So there is a kind of, not only on the side of designers, but there is quite often a kind of, idea, this is good and all the rest is bad. So can you please make sure when you design that space that you block everything that we consider bad? And I always have the discussion around skaters, because I particularly like skaters and young kids, and so I always, with every client I have a discussion about this issue. But I think they give for me a real, but older people don't really like it. They quite often consider it hostile, because they're young kids, they hang around with their music, etc. So I enjoy it. For me, it's an enrichment of the public space, but there are also a lot of users that really consider it as being hostile. And that is the same with homeless people. A lot of people, for a lot of people, it's scary, that they are scared when they see homeless people are becoming part of a public space. And I think that is exactly the point where we need to work on, because I think it gets a bit extreme, everything. Yeah. That's why I try to describe that public spaces need to be balanced. I mean, with that everything must be possible. And I'm not saying everything in the same spot, but at least. And one of the topics could be, a park for homeless people. That would be, I think, amazing. You could even think of a little village. In Copenhagen, you have this one village, illegal village, which is very hard for the Danish people to deal with. It's an illegal village, where there's drugs and all kinds of things. But that village is still alive, because the people who live there embrace their way of living, but also in their sense of freedom. So I think more of that would be really nice.
Well, there's one for you, Lena. One person looks at a situation and considers it enriching, and another person looks at the same situation and considers it hostile and is frightened of it. So how do we deal with that?
I was thinking about the homelessness issue, so I'm just going to go back to that because I've spoken to homeless people and they've said things like, you know, people look past them as if they're invisible, you know, and then the places that they're put up in, like hostels, etc., tend to be you know, cold and clinical and not particularly welcoming. So how can you create a sense of belonging, you know, for people who don't feel that in society, who are basically ostracized in a way, and they're invisible. So I'm going to sound like a broken record again. It's just about asking them really and getting them involved in the process. You know,
Yeah.
what would they love to have? I know it's a complex issue, but any kind of solution, I guess we need to apply an ecosystem approach where you need multiple agencies working collaboratively in order to address the issue, because if you attempt one thing without the other, it's gonna fail. So it's about understanding and providing safety and empathy. And I feel like we should apply the ecosystem approach because it should be everyone's responsibility. It's not just about homelessness or the people themselves. Because we're all like basically a step away from becoming homeless. It could happen to any one of us. So how can we treat it as though we would treat the climate change issue, where everybody should be responsible? So we should apply that same approach to homelessness as well.
Yes. And what I would say, by the way, this debate is always so great because it isn't about everybody having the answers. It is actually about us pondering these questions and just you know, working our way through different perspectives, which I think is really great. Great. Well, I think we have the opportunity to get a view here, not only what it's like in our fabulous Western cities, but I'd like to ask Adrian Yankoviak from Nairobi in Kenya if he has a contribution that he'd like to make.
Yes, thank you, Casper. Hi, everyone. So wonderful to join you all tonight from Nairobi. And my question is really, I'm listening. This is also important, this whole conversation around public spaces. And Nairobi is a city actually that's lacking public spaces and is trying to get closer to that goal of the desired percentage. So my question is, the environment and climate are really central to the future sustainable city. What is their impact on health and well-being now? And how can we address that in the future?
When we think about city challenges now in 2021, we always have to think about climate. Climate has to be at the heart of everything that we think about. We know that it's one of the most, but what is its direct impact in terms of air quality and other different things that the climate has on our mental health and well-being in cities? Ellen, I wonder if you have a view on that.
Well, I think climate is probably one of the most important things on our agenda for everybody at the moment. And I think, you know, we have to do our best, but not only in the city, but also in our own behavior, because of course, we also quite spoiled as a human being, you know. We want to be in a building where it's constant 20 degrees. We want to have a fast lift so that we are within 30 seconds at our office, etc. I think it's a little bit, and that for me was interesting to see in COVID, because in COVID time, you saw that exterior space became a lot more important than before, that people are a lot more able to cope with low temperatures, high temperatures, you know, all natural things, and therefore reduce their demand for luxury. Because at the end of the day, the demand for luxury, you know, like cars, etc., that uses energy, and energy is not producing energy in the way we're doing now is not very good for the planet. So that is one thing. I think we all need to go conscious back and see which things out of life we can just skip as being luxurious and deal with normal natural elements again. And then on the other hand, of course, we need to create a city with less cars, less pollution, more green at the same time. But it's both. I have the feeling currently we talk a lot about green spaces, healthy air, etc. But nobody is willing to sacrifice any of their achievements when it comes to comfort.
Yeah, that's right. So it's the inconvenience of people willing to do it. Now, it's really interesting point this, because people think it's about governments and industry having to take action, but the point that Ellen is making, it's also about the action we take. Adrian, let's see what your connection is like. What is your view about, you know, the ordinary person getting involved in the fight against climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just exploring that through a collaboration this year called Doing Zero. And working with a community here in Nairobi and a community in Manchester, and trying to understand what we as normal citizens can do. And that's going to differ perhaps slightly or a lot for people around the world, but it's also worthwhile understanding where those similarities are and where we can come up with strategies that are more universal as well.
Yeah, excellent. So I wonder, Said, if I could ask you, is it a responsibility for the city? How can you engage citizens? And what is the relationship between the city and the citizens in the battle against climate change?
Well, first of all, I have to say that's not where my expertise lies as a responsible for education and culture, but one of my colleagues, of course, knows a lot about this. But what I can say about this topic is that, of course, it is important for the municipality to get people active, to be participant in fighting climate change. And in Rotterdam, we do things like, I will give a simple example. We try, together with people, with residents, to create, for example, a long front garden just in front of their houses, where they put away stones and instead of that make gardens. So it's a little example, but very important also for the awareness of people, that they know that they have to do, that we are all responsible for the climate. And also, of course, another reason is we know that people in big cities, especially polluted cities, live shorter than people who live in healthier areas where the air quality is much better. So that's another reason why we try to make people aware, also through education, of course, where I'm responsible for. So, and I know that we have been starting a lot of programs on awareness of what can you do as a resident, as a person, to help improve the climate. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm so sad to say that we've really run out of time. Doesn't time fly when you're having fun? I want to say also a special thank you to the other people who have sent in questions, who wanted to ask them, and who we haven't had time to come to, which is Simon Poulter in Plymouth, Yuxin Star Sun in Hangzhou in China, Vivian Ziheri from Conducive Melli, and Malcolm Garrett from Manchester. I'm sorry, that's for the next edition. What I'd like to do is thank our fabulous panel and our even more fabulous audience for making this such a fascinating debate, as it always is, but I think particularly fascinating with such an interesting mix of people from different perspectives. I would say, and in saner times I usually do, let's continue this discussion over a drink or two, but we're going to have to find a different way of dealing with that. So I just want to say a very special thank you to our partners, Kunstinstituut Melli and SIG Festival, and to our production team, Jason Crouch and Melanie Rashbrook, who've made it work so smoothly today. So before we wrap up, I'll ask Tim Harrison to remind us about the Mindscapes events that are taking place this month in our two cities. And so it's good night from me, and over to Tim.
Hi, thanks, Casper. That was a really fantastic discussion. Thanks to all the panelists and to everybody who asked questions and to all of you for joining us. So yes, there is indeed another opportunity to carry on the discussion, although it won't be over a glass of wine, but it is in the rest of the program that we have coming up through Mindscapes. So what was really fantastic for me about the conversation tonight was how many threads it picked up on and how wide ranging it was. And a lot of these threads will be continued in the conference that we have curated with Kunst Institute Melli. That's happening on Thursday and Friday. In particular, that'll be exploring areas including green spaces and the public realm, which we touched on quite a lot tonight. But also we'll be discussing other kind of areas, thinking about domestic space and the digital realm and how those impact on our mental health. And also thinking about institutional spaces, whether those are institutions of care or cultural institutions, and think about what role cultural institutions have in supporting mental health and well-being. So all of that's going on. It's online and it's free on Thursday and Friday. So I would encourage you to check out all of that. You can see all the full program for Mindscapes at www.sickfestival.com/Mindscapes. And while you're there, you can also check out the artworks that we've commissioned as part of the project. So we've talked a bit tonight about Jan's fantastic drawings, which are all over the tram network in Manchester. But we've been blast cleaning poems into the streets of Manchester and some of the other neighborhoods around here. We've been creating an audio app with a composer, which allows people to navigate in a different way, different neighborhoods in the city, and particularly exploring some of those green spaces. And I guess those site-specific projects are more maybe available to people who are living in Manchester. But for those of you in the audience who are joining us from elsewhere in the world, there are also two commissions which are web-based projects, which you can see, one of which looks at the benefit system, and in particular, the UK's universal credit system and how that affects people. And another project is looking at, which has been working with young people in care and how they've been able to shape and respond to their own surroundings and their environments. So it would be really great if you could join us for some of those. Actually, one other event that we have, which is tomorrow, is called Welcome to My World, which presents and premieres 4 new film commissions, short films, which have been made by 2 artists from Rotterdam and 2 from Manchester, whereby they've basically taken a walk outside their front doors and reflected on how their own immediate neighbourhoods reflect their mental health and how they feel about their lives. So there's a lot going on. Please do check out the website, and we hope you can join us for some of those. But for now, thanks again to Casper, thanks to all the panellists, thanks to Kunst Institute Melli, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.